Representative Thissen, you just brought up the fact that you are going to be paying some of this tax that if it's successful, and congratulations for doing so. But you voted along with your caucus for that tax increase on a very narrow population, and some of us here on this side of the aisle are somewhat interested in how that will actually translate to the budget, because it wasn't as big as it originally was. It was slimmed down just a little bit. Can you tell me how many mental health beds will be paid for by this? Can you tell me how the Health and Human Services budget will be paid for with the tax increase that you are talking about? How Minnesotans within the mental health community who are struggling right now they can look at your budget and say, how is this going to help me? You know what? I would like to hear how this impacts the Health and Human Services budget, because from what you're saying is if we pass that tax increase, it will be just fine, and K-12 will be just fine, and everything else. But we have no way of knowing exactly what that would do to this piece of the budget. So if you can enlighten us and perhaps enlighten the governor, that would be helpful, because I'm sure he doesn't know.
The gentleman from Hennepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, Representative Dean, it won't be fine. And we've been saying that from the beginning. We've said we have to make serious cuts this session, but it'll be a damn well better than the budget that you put together, much better for Minnesota than the budget you put together. So if Representative Dean, and when he takes the floor back, if he could yield for a question or answer the question, if you're agreeing to put the $1.8 billion in taxes on the table, then we can sit down and work out how we're going to move that money around so that we can actually cover these mental health beds and do some other good things. No one's denying we need to make cuts this year. No one ever has said that, although you guys like to make it just about taxes or cuts. Everybody has agreed from Governor Dayton on down that we need to make cuts. We've always said that. But what the people in Minnesota are asking for is don't just dump it on the backs of middle class and vulnerable Minnesotans. Let's do a balanced solution. You saw the poll that just recently came out that said exactly that. We've been hearing that all across the state. You know, in the governor's race, that's where the people of Minnesota voted, and not just for Mark Dayton, but for Tom Horner as well. You know where the people of Minnesota are. They want a balanced approach. That's the Minnesota way. What you're doing is devastating the state of Minnesota with the draconian cuts that you may need to make to get your budget off the floor, to get your budget balanced. And so, Representative Dean, if you're willing to put the $1.8 billion on the table, I'm willing to sit down right now. I'm sure Governor Dayton would be willing to sit down right now and work out an arrangement so we can figure out what cuts we can make so we can actually protect some of the most vulnerable Minnesotans, which your budget that you put forward is going to devastate, and we can start those negotiations and finish up by Monday at midnight and get the people's work done.
The gentleman from Washington.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Thissen, we certainly would like to know where those dollars are going to go and what the cuts are going to be, but we don't know. We don't know. But you know what we do know? We do know that we have about 6% more money than we did last biennium, and we've got a budget that has been passed out of both the Senate and the House that funds our priorities. And you know what? We've got money within that $34 billion to pay for things like mental health beds, and we've got money to pay for community supportive services, which we also need. Those are priorities that we're funding. We're not extending an election that was over in November through into May and preventing us from putting the needs of Minnesotans first instead of this political rhetoric first. So I would like to know how much of that money, if we're really talking about that, is going to go into mental health beds, how much is going to go into K-12. Nobody is quite certain of that. We have a budget. We have a budget that is balanced, and we have funded our priorities for things like mental health beds and for community supportive services.